Okay, so if you guys didn't fill out the attendance form already, please go ahead and do that. And my name is Morgan. I'm a senior and I'm one of our CURBS workshops ambassadors here. And so
my name is Vedika. I'm a first year, also a CURBS workshop member.
Yep, and thank you so much for coming out to our workshop on how to publish in the UF JUR. So today we have an excellent guest speaker who has graciously come to deliver a presentation with us. And so this is Dr. Neil Wire. We have a little bit of information about him up here, but he is the curator of the Harold and Mary Jean Hansen Rare Book Collection at UF. And his focuses include the history of early books, manuscripts, legendary history, and scholarly practice in medieval and early modern England. So if you're interested in any of those things, you should definitely speak to him about that. And in addition to that work that he does, he's also been working with undergraduate researchers and the Center for Undergraduate Research since 2019. And with the Smathers Libraries, he showcases student research involving the collections at Gainesville. So you should go and check those out as well if you're interested. And in 2022, he became the managing editor of UF's Journal for Undergraduate Research, which is what this talk will focus on. And so he directs the work of the journal's volunteer editors and reviewers and helps guide the submitted papers through the review and publication process. And I know a lot of you in here may be interested in submitting to this journal or are required to do so as part of any organizations that you're in. So this presentation will be very informative to you on how to do so. And he's definitely a great person to ask questions to if you have any involving your submissions. So.
Great. Thank you. All right, let's see. I'm trying to stand in the way. Okay, good. The projector's not on my face. Can everybody hear me all right? Yes. Okay, awesome. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming at the end of possibly a long day to hear about the joys of academic publishing, which I'm sure is how you want to be spending your time. But so what I want to do today is talk a little bit about, not just how you can publish your work in the Journal of Undergraduate Research, but why you would want to. We're saying for some of you, the why is possibly an extension of a program that you're in. It is a way to complete requirements. But beyond that, I think one of the things that is great about this journal and is good as a practice is thinking about your work, whether it's individual with your mentor, individual research with your mentor, or collaborative research in the lab as the starting point for academic conversation rather than the end point. So when you submit paper to a journal, when you send it through the academic publishing process, you're not doing the same thing as turning it in at the end of a semester to your professor. You're starting a conversational process rather than finishing one. So that's a little bit of a blurb for the why. And so I'll talk about how you guys can think about registering yourself, submitting, formatting, and I'll go back to a little bit about what happens after you submit, how the review process works, and some things that I have learned from 1 year's worth of submissions that I think can be more broadly applicable. I will also say if I was doing this on a screen, I would also pull up a tab. Please do look at the current issue of the Journal of Undergraduate Research if you haven't already. It is available at the Open Journal platform. You can search UF JUR. It's linked from the Center for Undergraduate Research site. And if you're interested in getting a sense of the materials that are being submitted, the range of things that are being published, look through the 3 categories that we have. So we tend to divide our papers up imperfectly into the humanities, the social sciences, and then STEM, medicine. There is overlap between all those categories, but if you look at the one where you think you are going to submit to, it's a good way of seeing, sort of what the papers look like, what the topics look like, how they describe their problems or their hypotheses. So let's see. The mechanics of this, how many of you guys are registered in the Open Journal System platform already? Okay. Sorry, Dahlia, this is going to be redundant for you. But for everybody else, our journal works on what's called Open Journal software. So one important thing to know about the submission process is that the Journal of Undergraduate Research is open access, but you retain the copyright to your work. So basically what that means is that if we publish it, we basically publish what we think of as the first instance of it. You are free to take that work and do whatever else you want with it. You can submit it to other journals for publication. You can use it in thesis and portfolios. If you have questions about that, I would say contact your director of undergraduate studies first about how you link your submission to thesis work. But it's important to keep in mind that like this work is still yours. And the only thing that will have bearing on what you do with it is what another journal or another program might say you can't do. From our purposes, once we've published it, we've put it out into the world, but it is still yours to share as we work. Other journals, other professional journals may actually retain the copyright to the materials they use. So they own they own the rights to print that thing. And they will furnish you with author credit and the work itself, but you can do more with the work that you submit to our journal than you could with an outside academic journal. So registering on the platform, and if you have a computer, you don't need to do this now, but you can also sort of follow along. If you are on the Journal of Undergraduate Research, this page or the homepage, this is sort of the generic way the platform looks, but you'll see two little options in the upper right-hand corner to register or to log in. You will go to find the register link. And then you'll start to fill out a profile in the journal. You will be able to sort of give your basic information, your affiliation, which is just the University of Florida. And then you'll select the role that you're registering as. And you want to select, you'll have the option to select author. And that will give you the ability to submit material to a journal. You can read any of these journals, any of the ones that are hosted on the same platform. Other departments use the same software. But if you want to be able to submit, you will need to put yourself in as an author and not a reviewer. So once you've done that, really the only thing that you need to fill in aside from your affiliation is an email address. And for those of you who are graduating seniors, most of the editorial, most of the correspondence work with the journal will take place over the summer. So if you are leaving UF, please make sure that you put an email address into this platform that you will be able to monitor and have access to in June and July of 2024. So we have a template on our site, which again, I think that can be shared along with the presentation. But the ways that we, the submission guidelines that we have are fairly basic. We require APA format for citations, which if you're not used to using it, really means that you're doing most of your citations within the text, and you're using the narrative of your text to support the citation. Unlike a footnote where you'll be putting a lot more information into the bottom of the page or endnote. We do have a word limit, including references, that's bibliography, in your works cited page of 4,000 words. And we do ask that graphics are submitted within the manuscript. You don't have a limit the amount of these, like we say, but we also, for those of you who are submitting like portions of charts or portions of posters, it's really important to be sure that the size of the text on the graphic is still legible. So if you take a tiny little section of a diagram and you put it in paper, please make sure that you are able to enlarge that, because people will need to be able, like the size of the font that you have any information on will need to be at least 10 point. So we don't have a limit to the number of pages. Your articles, and you can see some of the articles that are submitted that use lots of figures, can be very long. But try to make sure that everything is at a size that it's big enough and good enough to be read comfortably by So all citation must be complete. In most cases, you use third person for your article. This is, most common in the sciences than the humanities, and in some disciplines where it is appropriate to argue in the first person, that is fine. If you do find that there are conventions that are specific to your own discipline of publication, JUR is interdisciplinary. Its readers are interdisciplinary, and its reviewers are interdisciplinary. If there is something that you think we should know about why you've written the paper the way that you have, please let us know in like a comment at the end. You can flag it in the Word document, you can put it in as a comment, or you can put it in brackets, but that might be, we've had people submit in, let's say, philosophy. In that discipline, it's very common to be able to invent cases. Our reviewers did not know that the case that was submitted in this paper was entirely made up, and we had questions about that. So if there are things that are very unique to your own, it's not sort of specific to the genre or the college, but if there's something that you really think we need to know about why you've written the paper the way you have, please do put that in. We'll remove it as part of the review process, but it will help us as reviewers and readers kind of understand why the paper's too long. So we do ask, the only other thing that we ask you to remove is any identifying information. So the first time you submit your work as a Word document, we need to not know who it's from, because we'll take that paper and send it to reviewers. We get between, I think, 70 and 90 submissions a year. And if we had to go back and individually anonymize all of those papers, that would be a very big headache. That's the polite way to say it. So please don't do it. So just make sure that anything that you have, including sort of, thanks, acknowledgements, anything that might identify you as an author, that it is either removed or like if there's a citation that you think is something that will, uses the rest of your lab, just like you can leave it out for the time being, or, say citation information. And we'll understand why. So once you've logged in, once you've registered with the site and you've established yourself as an author, you can go and click on the other menu option at the top, which is login. And then when you log into the program, the platform, you'll be able to see this queue. So most of the exchange, in fact, almost all of the exchange outside from reminders about dates, due dates, will take place within this platform. So when you go, you'll have the ability to click the new submission button and start the process of uploading your materials. When you do that, you'll select the category that you want to submit it for. And if you're unsure, it doesn't necessarily matter. You can just pick one. And it just asks you to basically agree to the things that I've just shown you as far as our requirements. You can leave notes for the editor. You will basically, again, say the copyright statement. This is more for what other journals might do with the publication. As I said, you retain the copyright to your work when you publish it. And then you'll be able to upload the file as a Word document. So your anonymized submission. You'll then be able to enter your own author or your title, subtitle, and the abstract. You can paste this in from your Word document, so it should appear in both places. But please just be careful with the way that you enter these titles here, because this is how the journal will want to display the title of your paper and the abstract of your paper when it is published. And so we'll go back and make sure like the abstract is correct, but if you have sort of a title, subtitle, you can break those out here. Finally, what we'll have to do is add names of your co-authors. These will not get seen, these get stored in the program. So I, as the editor, can see who submitted what, but this does not get passed on to the reviewers. It just auto-populates once the paper is published. So if you have co-authors, if your research mentor is also appearing as a co-author, put them in here. If they are just supervising your work, they're being acknowledged as your mentor, you don't have to add them as a contributor. Because things that are published here will also show up if you enter the participant's ORCID ID. They'll show up as publications that they are part of. So when you're creating your profile, you'll also have the opportunity to put in that identifier, which is not required, but helps kind of, if you're going to publish more in an area, it'll help you track publications associated with your reference identifier as opposed to your name. My name is pretty uncommon, although there are other lawyers who publish in medicine. There are enough Dutch people that eventually you get a couple of overlaps. And so I will see a few papers that, might be mine or might show up in searches for me if my last name was, all right. And then that's pretty much it. So once you've registered and uploaded the materials, you will submit it and it will go to me. As the editor, I will see in my, in my side of the program that I have submissions that need attention, and I will send them. I'll start the process of sending them up for review. Are you sure? Yes, you should, because at this point and at any point, even if we say initially, like, we love your paper, we want to publish it, up to the point where you said, okay, it's copy edited, this is exactly how I want it to look, print it digitally. You can say, no thanks, I've decided that I don't want it to appear. Either I'm going to submit it elsewhere, or, I think it's, I think I want to work on it. And yeah, that's it. So it'll notify me. And you will be able, when you log in the future, you'll be able to see if there's activity on the submission. So as the paper moves through the review process, if there are questions, if I've responded to comments at the end of the submission, you can always leave notes for me and I can respond to the platform. So you'll see that appear in this menu bar. You'll see, instead of having 0 tasks, you'll see that you have some kind of a notification, something. And the system will also send an email to the address that you provide if something changes, your paper moves through the steps. All right, so that's pretty much what that is. You'll see the paper as a submission. And then what happens next? Like I said, papers, when they are submitted to our journal, into any academic journal, they go through the process of peer review. And as I'm sure have experienced, or at least have heard, that the best way to do this is to send to blind peer review. So that means just the reviewers do not know who you are. You don't know who the reviewers are. And that ensures that the people who are commenting aren't, really biased against your work. So this process is a little bit more complicated than the one that we follow, but the outline is the same and the intent is the same. The reviewers and the editors are not necessarily looking for excuses to back your paper down or reject it or rate it harshly. We are collectively trying to find ways to help strengthen points, to clarify things that don't make sense to us or to our peers, to ask questions that we might have that don't, that might not be immediately apparent to your discipline. And in the end, as an author, your name is on the paper. You are allowed to take our suggestions for what they are. If we really have a problem with something, we will tell you, we'll be like, this needs to have these things. You can ignore those, but probably won't print your work. But everything else, the suggestions, the comments, the questions that we make are not sort of us saying, well, we know how this paper should look. We didn't do your research. We're not experts in your field. But we are kind of raising the questions that other readers might have who also did not do your research and are not experts in your fields. Because most of the people who will read this journal and most of the people who read academic journals in general are not exact experts in the same thing. They're working in parallel fields and they're trying to see how your work, your discoveries, the information that you generate, the hypotheses that you create can be adapted to for their own, or how they can engage with things. So basically, our process will work pretty similar to this one, where once you send the work in, we will try and find at least 2 expert or 2 readers in a similar area. We work with over, I think, 150 graduate students, master students, fellows, researchers across the different colleges and departments at UF. And so whenever a paper comes in, we will try to match it as closely as we can with readers whose areas of expertise just were submitted. They will read the papers, they will give comments, they will assess kind of how you followed the guidelines, whether there's any things that need to be corrected. And then they will recommend to me that either we accept the article, we ask for revisions, or we reject it wholesale. Most everything we get will have revisions on it. So if you get a message back saying we have some questions, we want to see if there's some changes that can be made, that does not mean that we hated your paper and that it's absolutely awful. You're never going to make it in your chosen field. That just means that this is how 90% of papers, the point of having them read by somebody else is to get their input, and that is what we will offer you there. So we'll go through one round of this, but basically after that first round, we won't send the papers back for further review. The corrections that you make, the version that you submit after that first round, will be the one that we assess to either publish or not. And if there's a reason that you aren't able to publish, you can always submit again in another year. We publish works as long as it is undergraduate research. It doesn't matter whether you are, where you are in the program, what scholarship program you're in. As long as you are an undergraduate at this institution, you can submit to this journal. And so after that, we'll have the editorial decision, and then accepted papers will move to copy editing and then finally publication. So we won't publish something with your name on it until you have given us like the very last okay that this work is good to publish, which is important because I think there were 2 papers that we got last year where we went through all of the steps, we copy edited the papers, they were ready to go, and we never heard from the students that what they had submitted was okay. And so we couldn't publish those papers. So please, even after you've gotten the yes, we're going to publish this, pay attention till the very end. The journal will usually publish sometime in October, so the fall of 2024. And most of the revisions will be done over the summer. So, like I said, I mean, the thing that I really hope that you take away from this and from any other publication that you do is that reviewers are not out to get you. Some of them are, but I try not to keep those on as volunteers. As someone who submitted to lots of journals and read lots of comments about my own work, sometimes it's you can get a sense of when people are really trying to engage and when people are sort of looking for reasons to get a task done. But we try, and I do this when I review other people's work, We are trying to constructively help you make the work the best thing that it can be when it appears in print. That is why we are reading it. That is why we are commenting on it. And we are also just trying to make sure that it adheres to the look and feel that will help other readers understand and best access the information. So with that, I've just put a couple of things to keep in mind in general when you're preparing your work for submission. There are 2 deadlines for JUR. If you're submitting for the best paper competition, that deadline is at the end of this month. And then most other submissions are due in April. So that is sort of the point where we will start reading applications. And even if you've submitted for best paper, if you want your article considered for publication in JUR, you still need to follow this publication process. You don't automatically submit it for filling out the form for best paper. So one of the things that we do is we kind of insist that we publish original work by undergraduates. So we don't publish review articles, summaries of other people's literature summaries, things like that. Again, if there is any question that you might have as to whether a work is appropriate for submission, both in your field and for JUR, please get in touch with us or leave us a comment when you're submitting the work through the platform. But reviewers and editors are looking to see what that contribution is. What conversation are you trying to start among scholars? And that usually means that your work should have a very clearly defined hypothesis. The template, if you guys have had a chance to look at it, will kind of break it out into sections. If that is not appropriate to your discipline, you don't have to follow all those sections, but we should get a very clear sense of what you are trying to prove, what you're trying to say, and then how you are going about saying it. Because the second point, not all of your readers will be in your discipline. And this happens for us even when we write for our own disciplines. You are coming to the work that you do with more experience and more background than is going to make it onto that page. And some of what reviewers will do is say, these things don't logically follow. Maybe there's a piece that is apparent to you, but not apparent to a reader who hasn't been working with materials closely. And so that's kind of what we're looking for. The process and the product should be clear. And that when you're citing sources, only works that are cited in your paper should appear in your bibliography. So if you used a whole bunch of other reviews, don't just pack them in there to say, oh, look at all the papers that work in this area. We really only want to know how the work that your own research and your own hypothesis is in conversation with existing scholarly literature. And that also means that when you're citing, you want to indicate to us kind of how the nature of that engagement. So if you're just citing a work, an article, a publication, generally all you need are the author and year. If you are quoting directly from a publication, you'll need the exact page number or the reference section number. So even if you can try and clarify within your prose what you're doing or what contribution a source is making. And that helps a reviewer. So instead of saying, scholars have said that this thing, and then a citation to 3 different papers, it's best that you use the word count that you're giving to say which scholar, what the nature of the contribution is. Again, these are things that a reader will be looking for to understand how your article is flowing. And that's it. I want to leave as much time as possible for your own questions. You can always send messages to this JUR at aa.ufl.edu or my own email at .ware@ufl.edu, which I think is in front of the
It's on the next
presentation.
slide.
Oh, it's on the next slide? Okay. Yeah, cool. And as it is compulsory, all librarians have to post with pictures of books. This one is super cool. I have no regrets about posing with it. But please, feel free to get in touch with me if you have specific questions, or you have questions about papers in your field, how they might translate into the JUR. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. Questions?
What's the most common mistake or like something a lot of reviewers have to comment on like overall journals that you've seen submitted?
Citations.
Citation?
Yeah. Nothing annoys a copy editor like figuring out different citation formats. So there are good guides if you haven't worked in APA style. The Purdue Online Writing Lab has good guidance, and then there's also resources that were made at Santa Fe that talk about APA for fields, but do try to make sure that you are following those conventions from your drafting phase and not saying like, oh, I'll put these all in later. The other big mistake or the other big thing that we usually end up correcting is, like I mentioned, the size of figures and tables. So if people, especially if you're working from a larger image, or you're generating an image from a program, a software program, make sure that they are correctly, they're formatting correctly, they're displaying correctly when you're submitting. Because we won't necessarily know if something looks weird on our end, if it was always that way, or if it's a feature of moving something from Word to PDF. So those are probably the two most common things that reviewers will comment on, and that like we'll have to look at in the production phase and the copy editing, the layout for each article. Yeah.
Does the research have to be done even with a faculty member or a mentor?
Yes, so it does have to be mentored by a faculty member. And usually that, if you're submitting, as part of the University Scholars Program, that is something that already happens. But we do ask, mentors will send in something for the submission that says, I have read this, I have supervised this research. I am okay with it submitting with me being acknowledged, even if they're not appearing as co-authors. You will have a spot where you acknowledge that you're mentor. But you had a question about that.
Yeah. Yes. So do you have to submit to JUR to be able to submit for best paper?
So you do not. You submit to best paper first, and then if you want to submit to JUR, you can then take what you've either submitted or what you've revised over the course of the month, and then submit that independently. But to fulfill, the criteria for other programs, like you and your mentor might decide, oh, we're going to publish this somewhere else. That is okay. You can still submit work like that for best paper, and then not submit it for JUR and satisfy the USB requirements.
When you say that your mentor will have to let you know that it's good to go or whatever, would that be before we send it for submission? I mean, submit it, or is it going to be during the editing process?
So we have a form that you submit with your initial essay. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. It's one of the things that you also upload. They'll give you a chance to upload like additional documents. And so if you have like data from your research that you're going to refer to that's not part of the PDF, like where the Word document, that's where you would upload something like that. If you have like super high res versions of your tables that you want us to look at separately, you can upload them there. But you also upload the mentor form. And that's where once you submit, they've signed off and said, basically the same things that you were agreeing to when you submit, that the paper follows the length requirements, that it follows the style, that you did the research. And so it's nothing more than that.
Yes, I'm in the University Scholars Program, and I just had a question about the submission. I'm not doing the best paper, but just the final submission. It says April 1st. Is that just for the first initial submission?
Yes.
Before the editing process? Okay.
Yeah, so what will happen after that submission process is the the folks at CUR will look at all of the things that have been submitted. If there are things that need some clarification or correction, they will kind of go through that and try and make sure that everything is meeting the requirements. You've had a chance, like if something got, if something is not looking right, you have a chance to go back and fix it. And then around the middle of April, things will get sent to reviewers. So usually that means that by the beginning of May, maybe the first or second week of May, I will have that initial round of comments back, and that's when you will kind of start to hear from, you'll start to hear from the editorial software.
Would you happen to know for the fulfillment of the USD requirements, you just need to submit it to that journal by April 1st?
Yes.
To get the stipend, it's not about when it
Yeah.
actually is published?
Yeah.
Okay.
The requirement is that you submit, because then anything that happens beyond that is kind of, we don't have, like a minimal acceptance rate. We try to make sure that if you're following if your paper is following the guidelines, if it's gone through the review process and it does a good job of explaining why it's, why it's doing what it's doing, that's usually enough to publish it. But no, we don't require that you stick all the way through the process. After you've submitted it, you're good.
Is there a limit to the number of times your paper can go through revisions?
Well, so concretely, the paper only gets reviewed, the paper will get reviewed for this publication cycle. It will go to the two readers. I will look at it, I will send you their combined comments. And then you will submit one more kind of revision that addresses those issues. And then after that, really, there'll just be a markup for proof. So grammatical errors, citation errors, things like that. During copy editing, it's not something like you can't go back and be like, oh, hey, I decided that I wanted to add a section to it, or like, I think that I need to address this more. Really that bulk of revision between really May and June is when you will, make the kind of the substantial revisions to your paper. But if if it doesn't go through in a cycle and you want to submit it to, again in the next year, it will go through the same process again. And so it can be reviewed multiple times, but for this publication cycle, it will only go through the one round of last year.
Yeah. I'm sorry. But like I see on like the USB canvas say that like the symposium abstract submissions is like March 8th. So is it like April 1st or March 8th?
So the symposium, the research symposium, the poster session is different from submissions to JUR. So the final submission of your article, the text of your article, the mentor form, and everything through the journal platform, that's what needs to happen by April 1st. But then the abstract for your poster presentation needs to be submitted earlier, so that they can put it in the program for the research day, which is important. Yeah.
And also like for the symposium presentations, I just need to submit like the abstract and the poster, right? Or do we need to submit like a paper or article?
No, I think you just submit the abstract and the poster, but I don't see that part of the process. So Jenna will be the person to ask about that.
Is 4,000 words, is that a hard limit?
Yes. Ish. We will spot you with like 100 words or so. So it's like if you're submitting something that's 4,030 words, it's okay. But it's really like if you are hundreds of words over the limit, we will write you, and again, somebody will contact you and say, hey, this is way too long. Either you or we can't.
For the poster for the paper, do we have to keep in mind that our audience might be too specialized in whatever field they're reading and researching? Because my project has a lot of theory in it, so it might be ideal me to limit like the equations and stuff that I put in like the introduction, so.
Yeah. Well, so the poster and the submission are two different things, because the poster you will have up and you will be explaining to people as they are, you know, talking to you at the research symposium. The paper, you definitely want to make sure, you know, that this will be, like I said, it'll be read by someone who is, you know, not an expert in your field, but we will try not to, you know, it's like we won't send a math paper to be read by 2 English graduate students, because that's not gonna, you know, be super effective. So, you know, if it's broadly within your discipline, you definitely want to explain, I think, what you're doing and why you're using these things, just because it helps the argument of your paper.
Right.
It helps us see the contribution that you're making within that body of theory. But you don't have to kind of explain like every single thing as if, you know, as if you're introducing it to a new.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, if that helps. Yeah.
Does the best paper have that 4,000 word limit, and like you have to follow all of the submission guidelines of JUR for best paper?
Yes, yeah, so it's a little bit of a weird kind of Venn diagram. You know, I think initially the best paper competition was designed to get people to submit stuff earlier that they would otherwise be working on for JUR. But we will have, you know, like I said, people who don't decide to submit ultimately, or, you know, in some cases, people who have already published research. I don't think we have a problem with that as long as it fits in the same category. We have the word limit just so that we kind of create a level playing field for most of the people who are submitting, you know. Because if you have, you know, if let's say the lab group that you're working with, like a dozen people submit a publication that you know did some of the research on, but everybody writes part of that and it's already out of journal, like that's a lot more work than we can reasonably expect a undergraduate student who's starting on one of these fellowships to do in, you know, 8 months. So it does, they do have to conform to the other, like to the requirements, especially the word count. They do have to be de-anonymized. But yeah, they don't have to automatically, like I said, they're not automatically considered for publication. And even if, you know, somebody wins best paper, we don't automatically turn around and publish what they've. There's pretty much no way that we would reject it, but we won't just take it and say, okay, this is ours now to publish. Yeah.
Theoretically, is there a way to add a segment mentor? Let's say our
yeah.
mentor is a very large reach, for instance.
Oh, okay. That's probably something that you should talk to either Dr. Donnelly or Jennifer about. But you can, if there is a concern like that, yeah, let them know, and we should be able to advise you. Also, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Is there a place that we can access any sort of like formatting templates or any sort of just resources like on how to format the paper?
Yeah. So the template is up on, I think it's both, it's in, if you go to sort of like about JUR, like if you go to the publication, the template is linked there. And then there's also a version that's available through the Center for Undergraduate Research on the page. If you, sometimes earlier versions will have a lot of Laura Nixon text. And one of the things that we changed from last year to this one was to really make the template more instructive of like, here's what the example should look like. Here's what a block quote should look like. Here's what a figure should look like. Because some of that information was kind of hidden within the dummy text of the template. So if you're getting something that looks like it's, you know, old, or it's really just full of nonsense words, we will try to make sure that the most recent template is available. But you can compose your work and either try to paste it in there. It also just has general formatting guidelines. So it'll tell you, each section will say, here's the font you should use, here's the spacing you should use. You know, So you can do it that way too without.
Are meta-analyses okay to submit?
So that would be, so you're basically you're reviewing existing scholarship. Are you just kind of are you saying like this is the state of the field of this?
It's like a meta-analysis, to go on to conduct research, so we're kind of like taking, yeah.
Okay, so like a research proposal for further research. Those generally, since you haven't yet kind of proven the thing that you're going to, you're going to submit, those wouldn't be something that you would publish. Or in most disciplines, I don't think they would be things that we would publish. If there is a convention, if there's a tradition in your particular field that like this was the aim of your, your research fellowship, you can always either submit the progress report and the proposal directly to Center for Undergraduate Research to, satisfy the requirements of this scholarship. Or you can send it to us and say like, this is something that is, this is how this works within my field. I need you guys to know that, and then we'll talk and see if it's something that we can publish. But usually we'll say like, we do have to see sort of like, not just that you have a claim, but that you've done work, you're submitting evidence, whether that's analysis or that's hard, experimental data to back.
Because we are like extracting data from studies, but it's not like we are taking data ourselves.
Okay. Then I think the worst that could happen is we're like,
Okay.
hey, this should probably get published somewhere else.
Yes.
But no, I mean, I think you can, if there's something that you think would help us understand why the paper looks the way that it does, you can put it in as a note or a comment when you submit your manuscript.
Okay.
And that will be incredibly helpful to us because I'm a historian by training.
Yeah.
I do not read papers in the sciences with a whole lot of frequency. And so even within the humanities, every discipline has their own conventions.
Okay.
You mentioned how researchers have their own ID where you can look them up and see their published papers. So how does that work for students? I was kind of like iffy about that and like kind of gray area, like would we have our own ID once we publish?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So ORCID or CID is it's a third party, it's an independent platform that basically you submit you create a profile on the site. You give it sort of identifying information for you, and you can gather publications under that heading. It basically issues you a unique identifier that you can then include in other platforms. And so that's sort of, it's completely optional, but it's also free. And it is a convention that a lot of people do use, especially in the sciences where you have like lots of authors on papers, lots of, a very high volume of publishing. It was kind of set up as a convenient way to network research together. But it doesn't require any external validation. You can log on to that and create it yourself. And there are sort of resources through the library talking about that and also how you can create your maintain your.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You may have already mentioned this, but to clarify, to keep the paper anonymous, like if I were building off of research that my mentor did, like can I mention their name or no within the paper, not just the
You would,
citation?
for the initial submission, you would probably want to remove that. Like, so if you were like, and even if it was something where it was like the X lab at, it's like, it's fine to say like this thing at University of Florida, like that there's some papers that will say like, we don't even want to know the institution that you're submitting from, because it's a small enough world, we'll be able to guess, what rare book curator is, right, or who's writing about special collections at the University of Florida. Stop me. But we from this point, like, we'll know it's coming from UF, but we also like, we wouldn't want to see like the identifying information from your lab where you're working for your course. Referred to as such. If you're citing somebody's work, but you're citing it as context, and you're not making clear that like, that's a connection between you currently, it's fine to do that. But yeah, definitely like anything that we could basically look at and trace back like close enough.
So what can we use as a placeholder and stuff?
You can just say, I mean, the template has the place for you to identify as an author and thank your mentor. You just leave us blank
Okay.
when you submit, and if there's something in the text, you can just say like, you can either put like bracket it and just say like redacted or something like that as a reminder to you to go back and change it. But the editors and the copy editors will go back and say, hey, when it's time to put that information back into your paper. The final copy editing step comes after that. So if you miss something, like if we're looking at this sort of like, well, redacted probably didn't like that, we'll send you a note saying this needs to get.
Are the reviewers all affiliated or is outsourced?
Yeah, they're all UF affiliated. Like I said, most of the reviewers are graduate students, they're master's or PhD students. And they're, working in similar, similar fields, similar colleges. And sometimes, if we get if we get a reviewer who will say like, I'll sign somebody and they'll say, I actually work in LM. Even if it's anonymized, I can't review this paper. We'll find somebody else who can. But no, all of our reviewers for the most part are internal to you.
Okay, and what if your research doesn't have a graduate program?
That's okay.
Okay.
They're internal to UF, but they are, they're not specifically, we can't match directly people with, we try to get as many volunteers as we can so that when the submissions come in, we can kind of cover our bases. But we're never, it's not like when you submit, we then go and say like, hey, I need 2 graduate students who are working in this field to volunteer to review. We will do our sort of best. We'll make our best effort based on what the graduate students have told us, and then sort of like, generally they will be looking again as non-specialist readers, but experts in people who have submitted their own work for publication or who have done a lot of reading in their field. We'll ask them kind of how the claims of your paper are, if they're effective or not based on their experience, just reading papers in the general area. So yeah, don't expect us to come back and be like, hey, we think you missed a step in this procedure while you were doing, while you were doing this lab work. Sometimes that might happen, but ultimately, like we said, the name on the paper, like as an editor, like my name does not appear on the paper. The decisions to publish what you publish and to submit what you submit are yours as the author. And they remain that way, no matter what reviewers or your editor says. If you really think that we're wrong, that's great. Or if you think that something has gone, we prefer that if you think that we're really wrong, you tell us why we're really wrong. But that's, it's part of the conversation of scholarship in general. And that's really the difference between submitting a paper like at the end of the term, the end of the semester for grade, and submitting a paper for publication. We expect it to go on and have a life of its own, as opposed to just kind of being a limited exercise that you did for the class or for a year or for a single project. Yeah. Anything else? Great. Well, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for your questions. And and like I said, anything that comes up, please do. Be in touch.
Thank you.